Hello and welcome to Sharing the Light. Thank you so much for joining us for this next episode. Today, our senior minister, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, is joined by Reverend Kathy Alexander and also Reverend Cindy Lippert, and their focus for this discussion is on prayer and prosperity. So let's listen in now as they discuss prayer and prosperity.
Thank you for joining us today for Sharing the Light. I'm Durrell Watkins, the senior minister here at the Sunshine Cathedral, and joining me today is the Reverend Kathy Alexander from Washington, D.C. Actually, she lives in Alexandria, Virginia. And then the Reverend Cindy Lippert from Cave Creek, Arizona, the Phoenix, Scottsdale sort of area, right? And we're all together here in Fort Lauderdale talking today about prayer and prosperity. So some people have sort of negative ideas even about the word prosperity. I think maybe it's been used abusively by some people. If you have enough faith, you'll win the lottery and you'll get every promotion that comes along the job, it's yours. Never mind, everyone else is also praying for their promotion. Right. So I think people. It's just been used sort of negatively. If you use this magic miracle water that came out of my sink, then, money will fall out of the sky. And if you give money to my ministry, then checks will be mailed to you. I swear I've seen this on TV. Oh, I just went to the mailbox and there was a check. They never say from whom. Who is this invisible check writer just sending checks? But whatever. And where's their bank account? And do the checks ever balance? And you never hear these stories. But there's So we do live in an opulent, abundant universe. Nature is extravagant and wasteful. And culturally, if materialism is the standard, well then some of the poorest in some Western countries are far richer than some of the richest in some others. And some of those that we are saying, well, they're not as rich as we are, they don't know it. They think they're doing great. So, how subjective is prosperity? I'm wondering if you're prosperous if you think you are. Like if you think you have plenty and you're happy that maybe you're prosperous and it's not someone else's place to judge whether that's true for you or not. But in any case, what part does prayer have in the prosperity experience? Can you pray for prosperity? Is that a good thing to do? Does it work? And does that have to look like, we're all the CEO? Because if we're all the CEO, then there's no company to be the CEO of. So surely the entry level person gets to be prosperous too. So what does that look like? How does that work? And how does spirituality play into the prosperity experience?
I think it's vital. First of all, wealth is subjective. We've created a whole Uber class now that unless you have $800 million, you're not considered wealthy these days. So the wealth today...
I've got a way to go.
Yeah.
You me both.
I think we're all agreed on that. So wealth is highly subjective. There have been times in my life where I've had more spendable income, but my quality of life was so poverty-stricken because I was doing nothing but working. So I wasn't experiencing life. There was no balance. I have a friend that I tell all the time. She's lived such an opulent life, and they've lived off relatively a small income and are self-employed, but it's facilitated their love for travel, all kinds of experiences, and she's done far more travel than I have. So what then is opulence and prosperity and unlimited supply? People will say, oh, I'll buy a lottery ticket and then I'll be out of the woods. Well, first of all, do you understand that praying for a lottery ticket is praying for a vehicle or a delivery system for that kind of money that you believe you're equal to? And if so, then you're limiting what God can do in your life. So if you believe you're equal to $1 million, then pray for divine ideas for that to be able. How do we move our feet to make that happen? It doesn't just, Indugu doesn't just send us a check from like the emails that you get, deposit of $30,000.
The wealthy widow.
Right. Exactly.
Who somehow got my email address. She didn't know anyone else to give her millions to.
Exactly. So when we look at externals to provide it, maybe a relative or, a person we can exploit or whatever, we don't have the consciousness to keep that.
If you don't believe you deserve it and are worth it, you won't have it 2 years later anyway.
No.
because
That's
you'll
quite
Well,
correct.
the lottery
Well,
stories
yeah.
are rife
Oh,
with
absolutely.
they've had more money than they've ever had. Now they have
And
no
then
relatives,
it's-
no friends, and
and no
bankrupt.
money.
Exactly.
what,
I think.
what else?
Well, I have another take on it with prosperity, contentment, and so if one can, and I believe this is absolutely where prayer comes in, to be content with what one has, and to be overjoyed and overthrilled with what the divine has provided. And living in, I have many also relatives who don't have two nickels to rub together, yet I would count them as very prosperous because of the generous heart that they have. They would give anything to anybody who is in need, and their neighbor is the one who is in need. And I agree with you that those who pray for the lottery are absolutely, I just had this conversation, are absolutely limiting themselves.
Yeah.
God has great plans for me.
Yeah.
I want to build this center, and
Yeah.
I want to help people,
Sure.
and I'm praying to hit the lottery. Well, widen your aperture. Widen the things that you do pray about. I do believe the divine is in the providing business, and as you mentioned, the universe around us is providing all the time. And yes, hard work will reap some benefits, yet quality of life is also part of that prosperity as well. And so it is a balancing act, and it is a working act, and it is putting your feet to what you believe. I believe the first place, though, to start is in coming into alignment with the divine, inside and outside.
Yeah, if you don't appreciate what you have, why would you appreciate having more, right? So I think it does start with realizing. I think prosperity begins with realizing how prosperous you already are.
Yeah.
I've got something. Maybe I want more. Maybe I need more, but I've got something. So let's start with being grateful for that, and then say, okay, now I want some more, and this is why, and this is what I plan to do it, and now I'm open to the many ways that can happen. And I also know people who they decide they want more of a certain thing, and part of that unfoldment for them is actually downsizing.
Yeah.
That they want to travel the world. There was a couple that she was a teacher, he was a firefighter. Once they retired, they started early, so they were able to retire like in their mid-50s. They sold their home. Maybe it was mortgage-free or almost mortgage-free by that point. But they sold their home and got jobs on a cruise ship. And
Wow.
so they had retirement income, they had working income, they had doctor on ship and food, and they got to travel all over
Wow,
the world. And a lot of people, that's an entry level job for them. It's they're gone 6-7 months of the year. They're sending money back home to a family, whatever. For them, though, that was their dream come true. So I think a lot of times we sort of judge people, and what we say is, oh, why? There was a filmmaker I was watching recently, and a successful filmmaker, and he had moved into a manufactured mobile home community. And you usually don't think of that lifestyle with filmmaking, but he said, his focus was on happiness, and he said that there was something about this community that was a community, and he wanted his children raised in that kind of community. And so rather than spending money on a big house, he invested his family's resources into this living in this tight-knit community. I'm sure everything was lovely where they were, but they didn't need the huge swimming pool and the indoor bowling alley. That's just not what. And so they have. In my southern rural roots, I have a lot of family like that they lived pretty simply. Maybe they built their own house in an area where you don't need a lot of permits and an architect, and you just get some boards and nails and you build a house. Maybe they built their own house. Maybe they lived in a small apartment. And they just lived pretty simply. Meanwhile, they went everywhere they wanted to go. They paid cash for their cars, and when they died, they left hundreds of thousands of dollars to their loved ones. Who knew they had 2 nickels? Well, they just didn't spend it on fleeting things. They invested in experiences. They invested in loved ones. They invested in make sure they had enough in their retirement years in case they had an emergency. And so, they didn't have the Rolls Royce, but that's not what they wanted.
Exactly.
But they had the money they needed to have what they wanted. So maybe you get to decide what's prosperous for you. And I think when we try to get involved with keeping up with the Joneses, that's when we get in trouble, because we're trying to live their dream anyway. So how is their dream ever going to make you happy? Maybe they wanted, the 8-story house, and if they got it, God bless them. But if that's never what you really wanted, chasing after their dream, it's either going to make you sad because you didn't get it, or it's going to make you feel unfulfilled because you did get it. It's not what you really wanted, or now you're working your whole life to maintain someone else's dream anyway.
That's not your contentment.
So maybe you retire and you get a job on a cruise ship, or maybe you become a famous filmmaker and you live in a little gated community of retirees or whatever, because the neighbors are nice to your kids.
And I may be predisposed to this, yet I think having a plan helps. You have a plan, and plan the way. I mean, I think plans don't always work out. Yet, if you know where you're aiming for, and that is your contentment, then aim for that and work. Get towards it.
Do you remember? You probably don't remember, but Jeff, your son would remember. No, it's from, but you might remember. No, you're a little older too.
Maybe.
And when I was a kid, no, I mean you were probably old enough to not be watching cartoons. You were probably dating or whatever. But when I was a kid, there was a Saturday morning show called Shazam. It was about Captain Marvel, and he and his little mentor. I don't know why he was with his mentor. He wasn't really an uncle or a dad, or I don't know what this older mentor was about. But Billy, his name was Billy, and this guy who mostly just drove the Winnebago. They just drove all over the country, although it seemed to be always in the West. It was always like, it looked like, often looked like West Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, but supposedly the whole world in that corner. And but they just drove around, and then they would find trouble, and then Billy would get involved, and then he would say Shazam, and the gods would bless him, and he'd become the superhero, and he'd get him out of trouble. But P.S., they lived in this little Winnebago. They lived in basically a huge car, with a bathroom and a little kitchen. And they just drove around looking for trouble, and then the superhero would fix the trouble or whatever. And they just seemed so happy. I wonder if you could just be happy, just living in your Winnebago, looking for trouble to help people out of.
Or finding adventure. I mean, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Drive the Winnebago and find adventure.
Yeah.
Amen.
So you get to decide what prosperity is for you. You get to develop the plan for what that will look like, what that will feel like, and how you're going to get there.
For me.
And prayer is part of that process. And the prayer probably begins with being thankful for where you're starting.
Yes.
You may want to end up somewhere else, but let's start with being grateful for the kicking off part.
Yes.
3 out of 3 ministers agree that prayer is a prospering modality, though it may be a more complex understanding than we've sometimes heard. But we get to want things, we get to appreciate things, and we get to pray about them. But then let's also be open about, let's be a little less attached to how that has to unfold, and we may be pleasantly surprised as the blessings flow in. So thanks for joining us again for Sharing the Light.
Thank you for joining us for another great episode of Sharing the Light. Tell your friends about this online ministry, and when you're in Southeast Florida, make sure you worship with us on a Sunday at the 9 a.m., the 10:30 a.m., or the 6 p.m. service. And now for a final word from our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins.
Email me at durrell@sunshinecathedral.net if you have a religious question or if you'd like to subscribe to our daily devotional magazine, Spirit and Truth. We'll send it anywhere in the United States for an annual donation of any size. You can also email us prayer requests, or you can make donations on our website, www.sunshinecathedral.org. You'll also want to check out our great performing arts series, religious education classes, conferences, and other exciting activities. For now, we wish you many blessings on your spiritual journey.